Insects are everywhere. There is always at least one crawling up your leg or flying around your heads when you're trying to sleep. But what if all of a sudden every insect in the world just vanished? How would we know that all the bugs had disappeared? Well, first you wouldn't hear any buzzing, chirping, or croaking. It would be awfully quiet. That is until the chaos started. While some plants make their own pollen, like this little pine tree over here, lots of plants rely on insects to spread pollen from one flower to another so they can make fruit. When an insect lands on a flower to slurp up some sweet nectar, it picks up pollen on its legs and wings without even knowing it. But when it gets there, it finds out that all the flowers are wilting and dying. That's because the plants have stopped growing. And that's a big problem for the bee because plants are the only thing it eats. Let's take a cow, for instance. Cows eat grass, but grass seeds don't grow unless they're pollinated by insects like bees. If the grass can't grow, the cow can't eat, and soon it will starve to death. Birds are the biggest group of insect eaters. All kinds of birds, from tiny hummingbirds to enormous ostriches, rely on insects as a source of protein. Every year, a single red-eyed tree frog can eat more than 1,000 insects. And to make things worse, frogs can't handle their business. That's because insects play a big role in cleaning our air and water. Plus, they're a major source of nutrients in the soil. Without insects, the environment would quickly fall apart. That's because they absorb water through their skin to help get rid of waste. Without enough water around, frogs would die. Cicadas make a loud buzzing sound by vibrating their wings really fast. And crickets chirp by rubbing their legs together. But what would it be like if all of a sudden every insect in the world disappeared? Would it be peaceful? And if that happened, there'd be a lot fewer frogs to watch on nature shows. Click the video on screen now to find out. But soon things would get pretty dark, because there would be no more birds singing. And then things would get really scary, because there'd be no more frogs to ribbit and warn you when a big, mean raccoon was sneaking up on you. But the worst part would be when you went outside and realized no flowers were blooming. You'd feel sad when you looked up and saw the sky was gray and cloudy. You'd miss the beautiful butterflies and dragonflies flying around on sunny days. And most of all, you'd miss the bees. Sure, they'd be annoying sometimes, but without them, there'd be no honey to spread on your toast. But without insects, these birds would go hungry. In fact, almost 40% of all bird species would probably go extinct, including puffins, woodpeckers, and blue jays. They might be small, but they're super important. And that means no yummy chicken wings for you. The same goes for pigs and chickens. They might eat each other if they had to, but eventually they'd run out of food, too. If you liked this video, you might like the book, What If You Could Breathe Underwater? And other science mysteries. There are stories about mysterious creatures, amazing adaptations, and bizarre biology. It's perfect for curious kids like you. Just click the link below to find out more. And if that happened, plants would stop growing. And if plants stopped growing, the whole food chain would collapse. Before long, the entire ecosystem would crumble. And without healthy animals to raise, humans would have to start thinking about what else they could eat. As the bee frantically searches for some new flowers to harvest, it suddenly drops to the ground, exhausted and hungry. While it might gross you out to learn that insects can carry bacteria, it's actually a good thing because that bacteria helps fertilize our crops. Take a look at this leaf. These spots look like diseases, but they're actually harmless bacteria that beetles have dropped off. These bacteria will decompose the leaf and turn it into fertilizer for the soil. Then when the sun shines on the soil, the water in the soil will evaporate and turn into water vapor, which will form clouds. Then when those clouds get all the way up into the atmosphere, they'll block heat from getting into space. That means Earth will be a bit warmer and life will be easier for the humans who live here. This poor bee has starved to death. And unfortunately, it's not alone. Then when it crawls into another flower to get more nectar, some of that pollen falls off and the plant gets pollinated. Maybe you think that you would unnotice this right away, because there are still plenty of animals to eat, like cows, pigs, and chickens. But those animals couldn't live without insects, and we'll tell you why right after. That's because even though we usually think of the ocean as a big, endless place, 90% of the fish, eggs, and larvae are eaten by other sea creatures. Some of those sea creatures are fish, like this bluefin tuna. Without insects near the surface of the water, plankton, which are tiny organisms that float in the water, won't be pollinated. And that means there won't be any plankton for the fish to eat. And if there aren't any fish to eat, there won't be any tuna steaks for dinner. Next thing you know, you've got yourself a fruit. Well, maybe not right away. It takes a little longer than that. But if you didn't have any insects around to help with pollination, you'd have a lot fewer fruits and veggies to eat. Soon you might be wondering where your next meal is coming from. First, there'd be no more honey to put on toast. And then after that, you wouldn't see any more juicy watermelons or plum. We'll begin by following the path of a honeybee as it flies off to find some tasty flowers to pollinate. This honeybee is off to a great start, because it's a busy season and the fields are filled with lots of different plants that need pollination. The bee crawls into a brightly colored sunflower to collect pollen. It doesn't know it yet, but this will be the last sunflower it ever pollinates. You might not even see any tomatoes on that burger you love so much. And that's because while it might seem like insects spend most of their time annoying us, they're actually doing something very important. They're pollinating our crops. But wait, What's pollination? And that is just the beginning of what would happen if all the insects in the world suddenly disappeared. So let's get started. After collecting all the pollen it can carry, the bee flies off to find some more flowers. That's because the disappearance of insects would have huge effects on the animals that eat them. As soon as all the insects disappeared, farmers would have to stop raising livestock because without insects, those animals simply wouldn't have enough to eat. Maybe they could turn to fish, since fish live in the ocean and don't depend on insects to survive. Right? Well, maybe not. It looks like the only thing left to eat is meat. But unfortunately, all the animals that eat insects would go hungry. Amphibians like frogs would also face serious problems. But there's a reason to keep watching. Even if you manage to fill your belly with food, you wouldn't be able to stay alive for long. Let's start with our air. Without insects, there'd be no bacteria to fertilize the soil. But here's some fictional fun to imagine how it might go down. Have you ever noticed how loud insects can be? For the first few minutes.
Yes.
No more buzzing in your ear or clicking in the grass. You can see why we should be thankful for insects, even though they can be gross sometimes. Now you know what would happen if all the insects disappeared. But you know what would happen if all the spiders disappeared? Thanks for watching.